Hey folks, Tim Newman with Soft Flight Studios bringing you another installment in our video series, Composition, Seeing and Being Seen. In today's video, we're going to introduce a new mini-series, if you will, called How It Was Seen. Basically, my thoughts and reflections on shots that I have taken and how the composition came to me while I was out shooting in the field. Let's take a look. So the image that we are going to take a look at today is titled Ground Swell from Devil's Tower National Monument. So here's the image that we want to consider for today's How It Was Shot video segment. This is in fact Devil's Tower. It is a national monument that sits in the Black Hills region of northeastern Wyoming along the Belfourche River. In fact, it is the first national monument established in the United States by President Theodore Roosevelt. And one of the things I would recommend that you do if you go to this monument is take this walkway that you see here in the foreground that circles the monument in its entirety. It's about a 2.5 to 3 mile round trip, and it affords you views of the monument from every direction. In my case, it also gave time for the clouds to move into the scene and for me to consider various sides of the monument relative to where the clouds were located in the background. And I think that's important because that clear blue sky that I encountered when I first arrived on the scene was going to make a kind of flatter, more lifeless picture. And I think these clouds really add depth to the scene. So I'm happy that I was able to work my way around the monument and find the scene that I liked. Now, one of the things that you'll notice here is these pieces of cloth hung up in the tree right in front of the monument. These are in fact prayer flags offered by the indigenous Indians that live in the area. They make pilgrimages to the monument, and they show their respect for nature and their elders in putting these flags in the trees around the monument. So it was important for me to work those into the scene. So I definitely spent some time looking for a tree that had the prayer flags in the right position to be used in the scene. Now, as I put the scene together, there were a number of elements that I wanted to work in here. Obviously, the prayer flags in the foreground, and I was hoping that the prayer flags in the tree would point to the monument, which they do here quite nicely. The sun was also rising because relatively early in the morning, so I thought perfect opportunity to star the sun with a much smaller aperture opening, and used both the tree in the foreground and some of the trees in the background as a choke for the sun, so cutting off some of that sunlight, but letting enough sunlight through that it would star up in the exposure. I wanted the tree as a balancing element to the background element of the tower itself. I'm looking for a diagonal working through the frame, and I think we have that pretty effectively in the walkway. The walkway and the boulder pile in the front of the monument actually work together to make a relatively nice S-curve, and the foreground rock pile on the left and the foreground tree branches on the right really work nicely to build us a frame around the scene. And last but not least, there still is a nod to the rule of thirds here. Not a perfect division of thirds, and I don't always look for that, but I think a reasonable division between the tree on the left and the monument on the right, and then foreground elements, middle ground elements, and background elements being our horizontal third planes there as well. I was careful in my exposure, took a couple, and realized that I needed to utilize a little exposure compensation on the negative side. It was a negative 2/3 of a stop in order to control the light in the scene. That sun could have very easily burned out much brighter than it did. So by knocking the exposure down with exposure compensation, we have controlled the overall light in the scene in what I think is a quite nice way. So there you have it, kind of my thoughts approaching this scene out in the field. Really not much in the way of post-production here. Obviously a little bit of a tweak of some of the colors and polarization, etc. But in terms of formatting and crop, this is pretty much the way it was seen in the camera and framed up in the field. I hope that helps you. Couple of last slides here that hopefully you will find helpful. Our settings for this picture were a shutter speed of 1/320th of a second, a relatively small aperture of f14 to enable that starring of the sun, and I shot this at an ISO of 400 to keep shutter speed up where I wanted it to be. As I said, the histogram measured a little bit hot, so we took off 2/3 of a stop of exposure value in shooting this. Last but not least, this was shot on a Canon 5D SR camera body. This is Canon's 50 megapixel camera, which gets a bad rap, but as long as you shoot it the correct way, turns out stunning images. Canon's 11-24 f4 lens was on the front of that camera at the time, and as always, I have Really Right Stuff L brackets on all of my cameras. Even if I'm not using them on the tripod, I really like what it does for the hand grip for me, and I got big hands, so that's important to me. Well, there you have it. My thoughts on how I saw that composition come together while I was out in the field in my head, the jumbled space that is. I hope that's helpful for you, and it gives you an idea of the thought process I go through as I'm working a scene while I'm out there looking through my camera. Don't forget to click on that red subscribe button down below. Hopefully we'll be bringing more of these How It Was Seen series soon, along with a lot of other videos that we're doing here at Softlight Studios. So get out there, think through your shots, and capture some scenes today. And remember, while you're out there, learning equals skills. Practice equals mastery. We'll see you out there.